Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Prydecker, and hello, Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Barson.
We're back for the September-October edition of FAA Safety Briefing Live. And once again, when I look at the issues that we've done and think about the programs that we've created, I think that that's a lot of ground school.
That's a lot of ground school. I had not thought about it that way.
Yeah, so we've at least in spirit, logged quite a few hours of teaching ground school, and I hope our viewers and audience appreciate that. As with all programs, we encourage everybody to apply for either wings or AMT credit.
Since we're teaching ground school, you might as well get something out of it.
Yeah, might as well. So how did we do that, Susan?
There are various ways to do it, but the easiest way is to use the links on the page here. You can go directly to the podcast, to archive courses, print copy, but you can also do a two-step process to go to the course and get wings or AMT credit. And I have to say, it's since I do the quizzes, I try to keep the content to what we present here, although we always want people to actually look at the magazine as well. Yeah, so what's the story about the magazine?
I'll start with the bottom one, which is we always want to encourage continued training, which is a lot of what this is about, but it has other functions as well.
Well, and actually this issue is more, it's certainly, we always are into encouraging continued training, but raising awareness of FAA resources, safety and regulatory issues, and some of the things that the FAA does is part of the function of this particular issue, which we'll get into in a second. All the regular departments, we have here a mission statement or an organizational intent for each one, and we try to stick to it.
Yeah, and each time in each issue, there's new material about either new things that are happening, new things in the industry, maybe new rules and regs, new initiatives from the FAA or industry, all designed to encourage and promote safety. So
that's the idea. So
this issue is about the Flight Program Office, and I knew only a little bit about it. I've heard of Hangar 6, which is where the FAA airplanes are at Washington Reagan Airport, some of them, and I've heard of Flight Check. I didn't realize that those two functions fall under the same organization.
They do. This is a first time ever topic for us. And we'll talk about a little bit how we decided to do this topic, but the cover picture is beautiful, and we'll talk about who gets credit for some of these things later on. But we're going to be our features include Flight Check, which is the main reason we started doing this, but also some information about the schoolhouse. Schoolhouse is a pretty common term in aviation training, but we have our own schoolhouse. I've been there. We talk about fleet management, partnering with other agencies, and then another important part of this is that our colleagues who were so deeply involved in creating this issue, they wanted to let people know about opportunities that exist in the Flight Program Operations Office. Turns out there are a lot more specialties and things than I had any idea about.
Well, and it certainly extends well beyond just being a pilot for them.
Absolutely.
I mean, ourselves, we know some of the staff in the Flight Program Office, and one of our friends is a former Flight Check pilot. And I remember last summer, maybe the summer before, we talked about what that was like. So I started to get a feel for what it was actually like to be on the flight deck of a Flight Check airplane. So it's quite interesting. So stay tuned, and we hope to keep you informed and interesting. So jump seat column, I'll tee this up a little bit. There's a reference to magic in here about how everything behind the scenes is magic. And I've often heard you say, because
say or complain
that when as a skilled writer, people will come to you and say, "Oh, can you please work your magic and give us a 2,000-word article by tomorrow morning," as though it is magic, but it's not.
No.
You've often, I've heard you before talk about there's a reason why that blinking thing on a blank page is called the cursor, right?
That is exactly right.
Because the magic's not happening at that time.
The magic is not happening at that time.
But it refers also to this topic and how everything works so well, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Well, it is, and this particular column it was by David Bolter, who is the he's currently the acting associate administrator for aviation safety, but his permanent position is Flight Standards Service Executive Director. And before he took the current positions, he was the director of Flight Program Operations. So obviously, I think he was very interested in the fact that we were going to do this. And the column that he wrote he's very proud of the team that he put together in doing these various functions that were brought together a few years ago. And as it says, describes many of the functions the team performs, and make a pitch for anybody who's interested in, I probably should have said these kinds of work, because it's a little bit of everything, to consider FAA career possibilities. And if nothing else, I hope that people will just learn about some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make the magic work seamlessly, consistently, and precisely.
And as you stressed several times in the magazine, when a flight check operation is in progress, it's highly choreographed, scripted, and or sometimes the aircraft are flying at different altitudes than what you might expect. They might be going opposite direction to the traffic pattern, but all this is necessary to the work. And the more we know about what their role is, the better we're able to stay a little clear and let them finish their job.
I would say if you don't read anything else in this particular issue of the magazine, the one you should read is actually just the next few pages, which is a little bit of a set of articles about flight check. And we'll start with what is flight check?
Yeah. As always, I learned a few things. I mean, I know that flight check aircraft are responsible for checking ground-based nav-aids as a example. And the author of this, somebody we know well, started talking about the fact that there used to be inspections of the postal airway beacons that were spaced 10 miles apart across the country. So it's stepped up a long way since then.
It's come a long way, yeah.
But not only are they looking at the ground-based nav aids, but also satellite and space-based navs, as well as all of the procedures, approaches, departures, SIDs, and stars. So it's a complicated process.
Well, the flyability of the procedure is good. One of the fun things about this article is it is written from the first person. Mary was able to be with a flight and mission specialist and learn all about what's going on right now, and talk about these were the 4 lessons. Each section is a little bit longer, but this is what is going on: inspecting and validating system integrity, the planning and scheduling. We have a slide that talks about what determines what happens when. But it certainly sounds like planning and scheduling, people have their hands full.
Well, I would say, it's not unlike an airline, scheduling their aircraft for maintenance, and, everything is on a timed basis that has to be done. Not only the equipment that they're checking, but also the airplanes themselves are on a regular maintenance program as well. So
exactly.
I would think that you're right. I'm sure they're doing it more. I don't think they're just using an Excel spreadsheet.
I don't think so.
No.
Flight inspection maneuvers. This was a fascinating part to me. And we have a specific page with diagrams and descriptions, in addition to the description in this article, of what the flight inspection maneuvers are and how important it is. This is really a key piece. For the data to be usable, they have to maintain a plotted flight path trajectory. And if there's some reason to deviate, then they have to start all over again.
Yeah.
And that leads to the flight check in U. We need to make sure that pilots know what's going on. If you hear flight check on the radio, because that's a call sign that they use, you need to avoid the flight path, have some idea of what they're doing, and mostly stay out of the way, because that way the job gets done and everybody else can get on with their business as soon as possible.
And I've heard flight check aircraft check on with ATC and sort of go over the script of things that they
Yes.
need to do so that ATC can be prepared and hopefully mitigate any traffic conflicts and, facilitate them getting their job done.
Well, actually, the ATC bring up a fun point in this article. Point out that ATC, when they hear about flight check, they're, oh no, this is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I think we heard that from our friend who used to fly this. So these are the flight check maneuvers. I know this is tiny, but it's on a full page in the magazine, and I would certainly encourage people to maybe tear out the page or print it off if you're using an electronic version, and just keep it handy so that if you hear something going on, you have some idea of who's going to be going where and doing what.
Yeah, the most visible thing is that, we see repetitive low approaches over a runway or something, but then there's
and they might be going in the opposite
and they
direction.
might be going in the opposite direction, but the flight inspection arc, that's really about localizer reliability. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows about the 35-degree arc. So this is a way to determine the integrity of that. They do VOR orbits and rocks, ROC, required obstacle
so that you don't hit the rocks.
So that you don't hit the rocks or any,
right.
Any obstacles that may have, been put up in terms of towers or something, since the last check.
The holding pattern, they also look at standard instrument departures and stars, SIDS
Mm-hmm.
and stars, we call it. The other block in here, this describes what, it's a little bit more information about when flight check maneuvers are conducted. There's the periodic, if commissioning, when there's a new nav aid or service, reconfiguration if something has been upgraded or repaired, special, so if they hear about a malfunction, mm-hmm. they go check that out. Radio frequency interference, and then after accident, things are checked out just to make sure everything is working properly. So it's a pretty big task list, actually.
Well, and clearly there's more to do than just the periodic checks. I mean, mm-hmm. there's other things that will drive that work.
Yeah, I still get into, and I know flyability is on a lot of things, but I think about that especially for things like SIDS and stars.
Sure.
To just make sure that pilots can fly something and that it makes sense.
I was involved in a small work group years ago with Part 121 operation about doing departure procedures out of Washington Reagan. And a lot of it was involved with taking data from the airplane, comparing it with data from flight check, and seeing just how close to the restricted areas planes would come following these procedures.
Yeah.
And it led to a few things being modified.
I imagine it did.
just to be sure and make sure that not only was it flyable for a flight check aircraft, but is it flyable for other aircraft that may be operating at a different, speed envelope and turning radius, of course.
I spent a lot of years flying in the airspace in that area, and I can tell you they take those things very seriously.
I'm sure they do.
As they should.
So, my favorite little expression in here is one of the things to be successful is show up and pay attention. So
yeah, I guess started this out. Yeah, I learned years ago, and I try to live by this, that 90% of life is to show up and pay attention. And this is what, when flight check shows up, you need to pay attention. We need, those of us who are out flying. So paying attention is super important. Adding the aircraft and its maneuvers to your mental map is one of the things we recommend, and keep that moving. The reason that we went into so much detail in the previous articles and that page that we just showed you on what the moves are, if you know, when you hear them talking about what they're doing, you have some idea of what the maneuvers are, and that helps you stay clear, safe, and out of the way. Moving over, you remember that if something goes wrong and they have to get off the trajectory that is planned, they have to start all over again. And it just basically means that they're going to be there longer if somebody gets in the way. So the quickest way to get everybody going is to stay out of the way, go someplace else if you need to, or just enjoy the show.
And,
I wish I could have. I've never gotten to see some of these maneuvers in person.
and of course, when you run into the situation, you might not necessarily know what they're doing or where they are, but you can also talk to air traffic control and just get a heads up about where this aircraft will be operating, so that you have a better idea about, either staying in the area or moving someplace else. So it can be a communication with ATC can help solve some of the mysteries.
Well, and the whole point of this issue is to demystify that.
Yeah. Schoolhouse. So, where is it? What do they do there?
So, what do they do in the schoolhouse? They teach. Once we got into the flight check topic, we started looking at all the other things that Flight Program Operations does. And one of the functions that's really important is pre-employment checks, and overseeing events-based currency flying, and just making sure that FAA employees whose jobs include flying get periodic refresher training. It used to be done differently, but several years ago, the idea was to centralize everything at Fort Worth Alliance Airport is where it is. That's where the schoolhouse is. And it is intended to provide FAA employees whose jobs have flying in them with the same kind of high standards training that we expect from the industry that we regulate. So there's a fleet of aircraft, contract aircraft, that are representative of the kinds of aircraft that a working inspector will encounter. And so there's proficiency flying. I always said events-based currency, but all of that is consistency and standardization, centralized oversight for currency. So I've had several opportunities to visit there. I think maybe you have too.
I've never been to this place, but I have been to the simulator center for the FAA in Oak City.
Yeah.
And
so there are some functions that are performed there instead of at Alliance Airport. Yeah. If you went to work for the FAA, you could.
I'm sure I could. Yeah.
There are a lot of opportunities here.
I've read it. I had an opportunity as an examiner when the industry under Part 121 started to require, we call it EET, or extended envelope training, but it's about sort of operating outside the envelope, a lot of stall, unusual attitude recovery. And the FAA actually extended an invitation to airline examiners to come to Oak City, and you could choose between either a 737 or an A330 and get an hour and a half or so of upset training in either one of those. And I chose the A330 because it was so much like a CRJ-200, of course. So,
a little bigger.
Yes. But really well-organized ground school, well-organized training, good simulator experience. And then one of the other FAA work groups I'm on, we deal with Part 135 standardized training, and we're familiar with the Flight Program Office because all of those pilots are required to go through recurrent training on a regular basis, and they're one of the leaders in doing what I would call more scenario-based recurrent training in that Part 135 program. So there's some interesting things to learn and to apply to other aspects of training as well. So, yeah, school's okay.
School can be a lot of fun if it's for the right thing.
Yeah. The next one is really about sort of optimizing and coordinating all the fleet, because there's a number of aircraft.
This is kind of the backstory. Flight Program Operations used to be spread across several offices. There were different fleets that supported different parts of the mission. And in 2016, that was all consolidated to form what is now Flight Program Operations, and it's part of the Air Traffic Organization. And you'll see there in the yellow box what its core business is: flight operations across the 4 primary missions. Flight inspection, we've talked about, support for research, development, test, and evaluation, aviation safety training, and critical event response. And in order to do that, in addition to consolidating the offices, there was a big effort to consolidate the fleet, because at one point, as it says there were 13 different models, and they were getting older and more expensive. And so there is an ongoing, but I think I would say significantly advanced effort to modernize the fleet. It's now just 6 different makes and models. And this is a really fun thing. Each airplane will be multi-mission capable, because there's all sorts of work going on for the modular.
Yeah.
Take it in, put it in, take it out for what you need.
So earlier on, as you were saying, that King Airs might be devoted to one part of the operation, Challenger might be doing something else. But in reality, because of the ability to scale down a lot of the equipment in the back of the airplane, I think I saw something, they went from an 860-pound pack down to a 260-pound, put it on rails so that
Slide it in and
you can slide it in and out of these different aircraft, so that all aircraft can do everything.
Yeah, and each one, there are aircraft that are, and as explained in this article, there are aircraft that are optimized for particular missions. But the idea is that if you really needed to, you can use each airplane for multiple purposes. Now, I can speak personally to the fact that the older aircraft, I used to have the opportunity to fly in some of the very elderly King Airs with panels that had all kinds of things in them. I mean, every single airplane that came around for periodic currency flying, it was different. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to get away from that and have a much more efficient fleet management. I love the way this article's written too, because each airplane introduces itself. Yeah,
in the magazine, the citation Sovereign.
I am. And this is what I do. Here's what I'm optimized for.
Meet me,
I really had fun with this. I didn't write it, but I certainly had fun reading it.
Yeah, and it just gives a perspective of the fleet and some of the missions, and it's certainly not just the pilots. There's a lot of work going on at the engineering level and the maintenance level to be able to sort of turn these into interdisciplinary aircraft.
There's a good word.
Yeah, there we go. I like the title, Flying Information, but it's really about cooperative relationships.
Well, there's a fair amount of the article that talks about the FAA's long partnership with DoD. Actually, that 60 years is about the same time that the magazine has been in existence, but we've never done this type of focus before. Flight inspection credentials to Air Force pilots and specialists. They complete training. It's really working hand in hand so that the DoD can maintain a small operational footprint. The FAA gets additional crews. Everybody learns something about what everybody else is doing, and that's good for taxpayers. That's good for all kinds of.
Well, and what that means is this flight check operation is around the world, and then supported by the military pilots, part of the Department of Defense.
Exactly. Another mission is the critical event response and transportation. The NTSB, depending on where they need to go, they sometimes use FAA aircraft to provide air transportation to and from the scene of accidents. And I know people who've been on those flights, and having everybody together right at the start, it allows them to do some briefing and planning well before they get there.
Sure. And the same with FEMA.
That might be coming up.
Might be coming up.
With all the was it Ian?
Ian coming into Florida. So
the one that I thought was it's quite fascinating. It's the one in the middle, the unique partnership with the National Science Foundation to support the South Pole stations in Murdo. Yeah. There was an inspection there too.
There was a nice article in there. It was a Challenger, that was assigned to that. I think that the point of this is that the FAA continues to do outreach to either industry or intergovernmental agencies to make things work, provide service, and support aviation this way.
Yeah, I think there's also, this was another of those planning and scheduling challenges, because when you go to inspect nav equipment in very icy places, you've got to do a lot with cold. And then, as it notes at the bottom, the most recent years have been really complicated because of the pandemic.
Going through different countries.
All the things that have to go on to get there. Would you tell me something about Antarctica? And
I was going to mention it in another slide, but I can bring it up now. That we had one of the pilots that we hired a few years ago used to fly Beech 1900s up to the North Pole and drop off supplies to the folks that were at the weather station there, and it did not sound like it was that pleasant to fly. He said the only thing good about it was the visibility was always superb.
I guess.
So the visibility was really good, but he said there was no way you could keep the plane warm. And he described for me the process about, what they did if they made a stop for over a certain amount of time. They would drain half of the oil from the engine and bring it inside. And before they put it back in, they put it on a stove to heat it and then put it back into the aircraft so they could start up and go. It was that cold. The Tanis heater just wasn't an option. Yeah,
I don't think I need to be that cold.
No. We talked a little bit about employment opportunities and the fact that in the Flight Program Office there are a variety of opportunities, and here's some of them.
This is one team, one mission, a variety of career opportunities, and they are in all these boxes here. And the obvious ones, what everybody knows about is pilots, but I love the line, nobody flies the way flight program ops do. And they have probably no 2 days are alike, no two places are alike. And but it says you're likely to spend nights and weekends at home unless you're off to Antarctica or Guam or Alaska or someplace else.
Yeah.
Mechanics. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit more in another slide, but Flight Program Operations has a 145 repair station certificate. And by the way, the airplanes that we talked about previously are operated under Part 135. So that's kind of why the cover tagline, practicing what we preach, comes in.
But opportunities for engineers,
big time.
Aeronautical engineers, electrical engineers, fitting equipment into the aircraft in an appropriate way and making sure it has, the power and everything.
Well, the power, but one of the things that's been in the news a lot lately is 5G.
5G, sure.
And so fitting aircraft to help measure potential 5G interference. Well, got to do that. Streamline and miniaturize, we already talked about that a little bit. Easily removable, lots of different things for engineering techs to do. Now, the flight check article talks a lot about mission specialists. Yes. The people who take the measurements and record and file and analyze and get a lot of, there's a lot of work to do.
Gathering all the data in a real-time fashion.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course, we have to train people.
Safety and training. And that is, sometimes it's standard, sometimes it's specialized. Now, policy and communications, that's kind of near and dear to my heart because that's sort of where my work has been focused over the years, but also because it was the policy and communications team who get the credit for pretty much all of the articles in this issue. And also for a lot of the ideas on what we were going to do and how we were going to present it. But the people who worked on this, and their names are in the magazine, they have the ability to work with technical people and translate it into plain language so that a larger organization can understand it.
Yeah. And I think the scheduling and dispatch function would be interesting, exciting, and a lot of spinning plates on the chessboard.
A lot. No, that's spinning plates on the chessboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to think about that one.
So this is all about maintenance that we were just talking about, and it's 240 people are taking care of this and making sure that the planes are, inspected on a regular interval, but also repaired if they need to be. And it sounds like it's almost a continuous operation.
Well, I think like most airline or professional aircraft operations, it's got to be 24/7 and 365. But because of the 135 and 145, they follow the Continuous Airworthiness Maintenance Program, or CAMP. We've mentioned in previous articles the modular mission system, making sure, and it was 20 mission-ready aircraft per day is the average. And they're trying to get 100%. I think this is something that you particularly noticed.
Working on 100% participation of all of the AMTs in the AMT Awards program. So it's the equivalent of wings. It would be like every pilot in this program and others, doing a wings program. It's the same for the maintenance technicians to participate in the AMT Awards. I'm always impressed when I think about the coordination of all this that needs to happen, and they're on a time schedule. But if it's all planned out correctly, then everything is happening on time. But of course, we know that doesn't always happen. So it's just another career opportunity that I think about, that is a good way to work around airplanes and be with an agency. This is one of the favorite columns, is FAA Faces, and of course these people are right out of the Flight Program Office.
They are, and although one of our staff wrote this article, and he knows I like Shakespeare, but I don't think he did that deliberately. So he kind of adapted some Shakespeare quotes at the beginning and then said, oh, no, don't worry, we're not talking about Shakespeare. These are two exceptional pilots, and Lori Faber is the chief pilot for the Flight Program Operations, and you'll see her picture and a couple of the photos in this issue. She started in the military and then happened to get paired with somebody who was in the FAA who persuaded her this would be a great career. So she's like a lot of people in our agency, loves aviation, loves flying, flies for currency with both the ATP and rotorcraft flight instructor certificates.
And has been in different places, certainly,
lots of them.
Certainly with her military experience, but also did some time up in Alaska.
Yep.
And now she's chief pilot in this operation.
And loves serving GA through this particular function. And
then John J.D. Jeffers Jr.
JD started out with watching crop dusters, and I believe he also mentions that he watched some of the World War II planes flying, and he loved it all, started flying, and then I love this part, to finance his fun flying, he became a controller.
Air traffic controller, yeah.
And then one day, flight check crew showed up for lunch, and they kind of persuaded him that, gee, this could be a fun thing to do. So early on when we were planning this issue, I believe they were both in the room with, we were watching a screen with a lot of little tiny people, but the pilots really got into there was this time, and there was that time, and there was the other time, and they had some absolutely incredible stories. We had to keep dragging ourselves back to, this is the mission, here's what we're talking about, not hangar flying, which is what we all really like to do.
Yeah, of course. So anyway, congratulations to those two for being recognized and for their contributions to aviation safety, for sure. So I first looked at this and thought it was trust but verify, but I see you spun that around. Of course, if you grew up in the 80s and were paying attention, trust but verify became a popular slogan, but you've turned it around.
I did. That's because in order to trust in the system, somebody has to verify. And what I wrote in here is that, well, everybody kind of sort of maybe knows that somebody somewhere does all of this work. And I, having been in the agency for a while, I knew that it was the flight check people, and I maybe even knew who some of them were, but I didn't know much else. And so learning a lot of what's going on behind the scenes and how this gets done and some of the people who do it has been really great. And we enjoyed working with them. As I said before, the policy and communications team we worked with a lot to develop these articles. And it's a real treat for us on the staff, especially to work with people who are not only passionate about aviation, but the policy and communications team especially, they're good writers. So my job as editor was quite easy with this issue because we got some very well-written stuff right from the beginning.
How did this all start? Did they reach out to you, or did you reach out to them?
Well, actually, it started last September, a year ago. The whole idea was to get out some more information about flight check. What is it? Mm-hmm. And the fact that we need to help educate the general aviation community into what flight check is and how to work when we're around and that sort of thing. So we said, yeah, sure, we'll be glad to help you with that. And we thought maybe there would be an article, maybe we'd do a fast blast. But when we got into the conversation, the one where everybody was telling stories, war stories, as it were, we all realized that there's a lot of really interesting stuff here, and it's a good story to tell, and we would like to share a little bit more of it. So it took a while for us to get to, figure out what we wanted to present and how to do it and get it all scheduled. But here's the result.
Yeah, and as always, lots of good articles and a good magazine.
And I made a lot of new friends too.
I'm sure. So we're leaving a little bit of the flight program operation behind and talking about some other sort of current things. The GAJSC, which used to be the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee, is now the Safety Committee.
Which is probably what everybody thought it was to start with.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those acronyms that's hard to say, though. You can't string those together very well.
Yeah, but if you say GAJSC enough, which we do, you tend to be able to roll it off the tongue pretty fast. So it's a new website. I think you went and checked that out.
I did. I checked it out today. It's gajsc.org. And so this group it's a joint venture between government and industry. Everything devoted towards safety and a variety of topics. There's a monthly topic that is published, which I suppose the FAA is responsible for that.
The magazine staff does a lot of design work for them,
They have another tab on safety enhancements, and then just other documents that is, they're all easy reads. And all related to some aspect of aviation safety, whether it's from a maintenance standpoint or an operation standpoint. So name change to kind of realign and refocus on the safety issue. And like I said, I went to the website today and spent 10 minutes looking around, and I would encourage those of you who are not familiar to just go ahead and check it out.
Well, there's also, the magazine staff works with the GAJSC to publish the Fly Safe topic of the month. And you will see some of those very advertisements and topics in the magazine because we regularly kind of help promote them there. Yeah.
This is our drone debrief. As we often talk about, so many of the things that we say about drones actually apply to powered aviation, aircraft,
traditional
flights. But this one is really about making sure as a drone operator that you have the required visibility, you can see the drone. If you're watching it on a screen, make sure that that's not your only source. It's quite a bit like sitting in a aircraft with a lot of new avionics, and you're sort of focused on the panels and don't forget to look outside. So the application of this for drones is simple. If you're a drone operator using a screen, make sure you have an observer, or more than one.
Well, you've got to make sure that you divide your attention, and drone operators, that's really not, the FAA says that drone operators are pilots, remote pilots, which means see and avoid as part of the responsibility.
Yeah.
So lots of ways to look out for things, and they are to look out for other traffic, and there's a lot of good tips in this particular article.
Yeah, and the next one turned out to be one of my favorites as well. This is our vertically speaking, of course, about helicopters, and about a conversation that occurred between a lieutenant and a pilot of an Apache. He said, "Why do you think we have all these great features on this aircraft?" And the pilot said, "Well, because they designed an airplane for maximum effect on the battlefield." And the lieutenant said, "No, that's not the reason. It's to bring this aircraft and your crew home safely every night."
Yeah, I love the way you put it.
And,
no, Lieutenant, you're
yes.
just about saying it. It's because the taxpayers want you to bring it home.
And
right.
But that's a lesson and a statement that applies to everything we do in aviation, certainly to charter operators, to airlines, to us and our small aircraft taking somebody for a scenic flight. I mean, the expectation is we're going to keep everybody safe and complete the mission. And to some extent, the enhanced equipment that we have in our airplanes can help us with that in terms of situational awareness and things like that. In the realm of the helicopters, it's all about enhanced vision systems, goggles, enhanced vision, synthetic vision, and even CVS, which was a new term I didn't know about.
Yeah, the combined vision systems. Yeah, we've done a couple of feature or focus issues about some of the enhanced vision systems, the synthetic, and what's the difference between them. I think I did not realize quite the extent to which they had been adapted and evolved for rotorcraft before looking at this article. But he's talking about in 1993 the special systems, and now you can do so much more.
But it's a great message though.
Oh, of course.
Bring everybody
home safe, which is what everybody's supposed to do, no matter what bells and whistles you have or don't have.
Yeah, for sure. Federal Flight Surgeon has a good article on fatigue and fatigue management. And in her first paragraph, I really like the point about there's lots of rules about duty time that don't really apply to Part 91 operations. But physiological limitations do apply to Part 91 because we're all subject to fatigue. And I suspect if we could see a show of hands of everybody who's watching this and say how many of you have flown fatigue, would raise our hand. We've all done it, but there's certainly some risk involved. And the article goes into quite a bit of detail about risk mitigation. Stay hydrated. You can take a break. Too much night flying, of course, can be a problem. And then what are some of the effects in terms of just your ability to process, carry out motor skills? I noticed that when I'm tired, and she actually mentioned here, you get a little task fixated, that I'm doing this one thing really well, but, other things need attention too.
Well, and this one, this piece, the particular topic ties into what Flight Program Operations does for two different reasons. One is going long, because there certainly are some lengthy flights and some long days associated with, say, if you're going to fly to Antarctica, you probably can't, that's going to be a long trip, and that has its own type of fatigue. But another one is the kind of work that pilots and flight program operations do. It can be very fatiguing simply because you're not taking off and cruising for a long time and then landing. you're doing a lot of operations, and if somebody gets in the way, then you have to break that off and start all over again. And I think we were talking about that beforehand.
Yeah, some years ago, our airline participated in a research program with Washington State University, and they were looking at the effects of fatigue measured by reaction time, and the parameters were the test was which is going to be more fatiguing, a single 8-hour flight, start to finish, or 8 hours of flying divided into 5 flights. So takeoff, land, and so forth, where that time also equaled 8 hours. And we put people in a simulator actually to do this for over a month. And the researchers at Washington State University gathered the data and concluded that, as you might expect, although I can't think of anything more tiring than sitting somewhere for 8 hours, that was not the most fatiguing. It was the repetitive operations, the up and down, the challenges that come with arriving and departing airports. And as you said, it applies to the flight check pilots because they're not only doing that, there's the burden of, operating against the grain sometime, watching out for traffic, everything involved in that.
Well, and I can relate that to general aviation flying too. Several years ago, when I lived in Virginia, I was trying to get the aviation ambassador jacket, and it involved visiting all of Virginia's public use airports. And it was easy enough to get the ones in my neighborhood, but then sometimes you would have to fly for 2 hours to get to the next one, and then there were 4 or 5 in the same spot. And if you had invested all the time and money to get there, the temptation was, well, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. And I remember I started taking another pilot with me so that we could share, we could split it off. But fatigue, you were tired, but you'd think, well, but I've already invested so much in this, I want to keep going.
And there's acute fatigue, which, I just missed a night's sleep, or there's the chronic where it keeps happening and happening. When I did aircraft training, 121 operation, it was at night because the aircraft I was training on didn't have any simulators to support it. So we did all of our aircraft training at night. It was really hard.
Yeah.
It just was a schedule I wasn't used to. And although people told me I would get used to it, I said, I don't want to get used to this. But it was a challenge. And there was 2 or 3 times that I can remember when I actually called off the lesson because I just thought, I can't manage everything that I have to manage. I don't think I can do it and be safe. So we just called off the lesson.
Well, and that's a good thing. The reason we're spending some time on this one is that no matter what kind of flying you do, whether it's general aviation, airline flying, the kind of specialized operations that flight program operations does, the risk of fatigue is something that all of us are susceptible to. And I really like this phrase too. It's unwise to underestimate human ability at self-deception, especially when we really, really want to get something done.
Yeah, of course.
So let's, there's a lot of research into fatigue management and countermeasures, but frankly, the best thing is to pay attention and make sure you get proper rest.
And on the other part of the medical spectrum is the cold. The importance of staying warm. And
we chose this topic also because, well, a couple reasons. One is that in some parts of the country anyway, we're starting to move into winter, which will be the cold operating season. But also, we thought this would be a good topic to tie into the discussion we had about Antarctica and some of the, North Pole or South Pole, the operations that go on there. Endothermic is not a word that I use very often, but I might have to start because it's nice. Yeah, the whole controlling body temperature through metabolic processes, and that I had not really thought about the mechanics before of how you stay warm. But
well, and from a from a flight training standpoint, I know the people who do flight training up at the flight school up in North Dakota, And I asked him one time, I said, so how cold can it be before you don't go? And it was a surprisingly low temperature. But of course, they're very invested in all kinds of survival equipment, blankets and flares and everything, because if they end up in an off-airport landing somewhere in that time of the year,
they have
to have some help. And it applies to perhaps how we would fly in general aviation airplanes if we know we're going to be in that type of an area.
Well, and know that as with fatigue, being really cold, you could have a decline in judgment, memory, and thinking, and it compromises, like fatigue. Hypothermia compromises your ability to recognize that you're impaired.
Yeah, and they make a strong point about saying make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector.
Yes, and the fact that sometimes people are afraid of using cabin heat because of CO. The solution is not to keep the heater off, because that's going to harm you in other ways. The solution is to get a panel mounted or portable active CO carbon monoxide detector, which
and keep it fresh if it needs to be replaced, and just
a lot of them around these days.
Sure. So ATIS in September, October, several.
It's pretty full list of topics this time.
Yeah, we could start at the bottom. There's new information on 5G update, and the comment was that although the number of accidents have decreased, the number of accidents due to go-arounds have actually been on the increase for a variety of reasons. But it makes me think that, from a flight instruction standpoint, we need to pay attention to teaching people about go-arounds, and not just from the point where we normally call them, which is close to the runway, but I mean, a go-around can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
You can be starting an approach and be 1,500 feet above the ground and have to do a go-around for some reason. So it's, to me, practicing them is a good skill building thing. Also, courses on illegal air charters, which have been in the news.
Information on the new Part 147 regulations for mechanic training schools. The other thing that ties into the fatigue focus on the Air Medical Advisory this month is a new pilot minute video. All these are free resources. The new database for airworthiness directives and service bulletins. And then Joint Global Safety Conference on Vertical Lift. I think this also talks about the new name, and we're going to talk about that in the next issue, for Vertical Aviation Safety Team, VAST.
Oh.
That's the logo right there. And as you know, the next Safety Briefing Live for November, December will be probably the last one that we do, because I am retiring January 31st.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But this has been a lot of fun. If I think we're close to maybe 29 or 30, and if you divide that into how many years this has been, it's been a number of years that we've been doing this. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a couple of years we've been doing this, but it's been 37 years that I've been in the federal government. Yes.
Yeah, very good. So we'll announce when the next Safety Briefing Live will be, probably sometime in towards the end of November. We encourage everybody,
or early
December, but we'll encourage everybody to watch it. As we do always say, is we appreciate everybody's interest and viewership and attention. We wish all of you the best, especially our friends in Florida, and stay safe and be well.
And don't forget to get Wings credit for the magazine.
That's it. Take care.
See you next time.